Prashant Kesri from Zenove and the session host for today. Hope I'm audible and all of you can see the holding slide. Welcome to the Zenove and Persistent Digital Engineering Leadership Series on 20 years of Agile, exploring the past, present, and future. We are very happy to host you at this event. We'll be starting the session in about 5 minutes. And before then, I wanted to share a few logistical details that will help ensure the smooth running of this event. By default, all the attendees are on mute. If you're having any issues in audio, just check your internet connection, unmute your laptop audio, use headphones or earphones for better clarity, sit in a quiet room, and integrate your audio output to Zoom. If you're having any technical issues, it is advisable to download Zoom application in your system. We will be starting our session in a couple of minutes from now as we wait for a few more leaders to log in. In case there's a problem that you're unable to resolve, please drop us a note at events@zenove.com and someone from the team will help you with the same. Thank you for your attention. Good morning to one and all. Hope I'm audible and all of you can see the holding slide, which should be on your screen. I am Prashant Keshri from Zinnov and the session host for today. I trust all of you and your family ones are safe and healthy. I know these are extraordinary circumstances because of COVID-19, and all of us are trying to adapt and thrive given the circumstances. First of all, thank you very much for taking out time to attend the Zinnov and Persistent Digital Engineering Leadership Series, 20 Years of Agile, exploring the past, present, and future. We welcome you all and are very happy to host you. Zinnov and Persistent brings together a series of bi-monthly leadership events on multiple themes on emerging and deep tech like cloud, AI, ML, IoT, Agile, etc. Today's event, Agile, is one of them. We would like to thank our partner, Persistent Systems, for their continuous support. Before we start the session, just wanted to share a few logistical details again for the attendees who have just logged in. By default, all the attendees are on mute. If you're having any issues in audio, just check your internet connection, unmute your laptop audio, use headphones or earphones for better clarity, sit in a quiet room and integrate your audio output to Zoom. If you're having any technical issues, it is advisable to download Zoom application on your system or use the web version of Zoom in your Google Chrome browser. Throughout the entire session, please feel free to share your thoughts or your point of views or comments, or even ask your question in your chat or a Q&A tab to host and panelists. We would love to know your thoughts and answer your questions. Now, as a special feature on Zoom, you can vote for a question asked by other attendees by giving a thumbs up for a question, which would make it a most popular question to be answered by us. You'll find the chat or the Q&A tab in the right bottom corner of your screen where I've just dropped a welcome note. During the session, you can also change the view of your Zoom screen. You'll find the button on your top right corner of the screen. For best experience, during the keynote talk, have the active speaker view, and during panel discussion, have the gallery view. Lastly, we would also like you can also share your views and insights from this session on social media. Don't forget to tag us @Zinnov, @Persistent Systems, #Zinnov. Great, let's start the session. And we welcome you again to the Zinnov and Persistent Digital Engineering Leadership Series on 20 Years of Agile, exploring the past, present, and future. With that, I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Sangeeta Anand, Principal at Zinnov, to deliver the opening note and start the event. Over to you, Sangeeta.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be sharing my screen and hope everybody can see that. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes, good to go.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever you're joining the session from around the world. We welcome you to Zinnov's Digital Engineering Leadership Series, combined with presented to you by Persistent and Zinnov together. And the topic of today is a very relevant topic, and we are 20 years of Agile and the evolution of Agile over the last 20 years. And what does the future hold for Agile? Don't write it off yet. I don't think it's dead yet. And we have an interesting lineup of speakers, keynote speakers, and an interesting lineup of panel discussion for you today to discuss this topic. I'm Sangeeta Anand and I'm principal at Zinnov, and I work for the Engineering Excellence Organization, helping companies around the world adapt and transform into global organizations and build centers of excellence wherever they are going to be located, irrespective of the choice of location. In my past life, prior to joining Zinnov, I was an Agile coach and also a director of delivery excellence for several companies and have been doing this for several years. So this topic is very close to my heart and something that I'm very passionate about. In February 2001, a group of 17 software gurus got together in Utah and discussed about what can they do to make the whole uh, software principles much more lightweight, and what can they do to help organizations adapt some of these principles. And at the end of that discussion was born the Agile Manifesto, which presented the 4 Agile values, as you can see here. And while everything on the top, or if you're reading a document, while everything on the left is everything on the top is what they value the most, everything on the bottom or everything on the right is still very relevant. But everything on the top, individuals and interactions, working software, customer collaboration, and responding to change is the most important driver to help companies adapt agility. And of course, they also came up with 12 principles. I'm not going to go into the details of these, but I'm sure every one of you here or every agile practitioner must have heard all of these time over the last 20 years. But at the core of it, what does it all really talk about? It all talks about people. How do we come together to work as a team? And how do we all build working software that can provide some value to the application that we are building or to the company, or to the business, or to the market, or to our customers. And with that in mind, we also see some of the key things that has happened over the last 20 years and how companies have adapted Agile and what experience has been so far. Harvard Business Review found that companies experience almost 60% growth in revenue and profit due to Agile adoption. And in KPMG Global Survey in 2019, over 68% of organizations stated that they have faster product delivery as one of their key drivers for agility. And according to Request, with more and more companies going on to cloud and digital transformation, the most chosen method of working is agile. And also due to the agile adoption, HBR found that CEOs are now spending more and more time on strategy rather than the operations and spending less time on operations. Zinnov conducted a survey prior to this series, and about 50 participants participated and responded to that. Here we present to you some of the survey results, and we will be using these as some of the key discussion points during our upcoming keynotes and the panel discussions as well. So, has the Agile Manifesto been truly successful? While so many people are talking about should it be rewritten to be in line with the current times, 85% of the survey respondents said that the Agile Manifesto has been successful and it has set to achieve what it was built out for. Does the Agile methodology truly give a company agility? Almost about 35% said yes. And if you add the somewhat category also, predominantly the answer is yes. Would you call your company successful in implementing Agile? While only 17% of the participants have said that, but you can also see that almost nearly 50 or more percentage are on the fence and they do think that they're successful. And maybe there are some missing factors that can truly help them get over that last hurdle and bring that agility in their organizations and make them even more successful. And at the end, do Agile methodology apply to startups? And you can see that's a resounding yes of 92% of our participants said, yes, it does apply greatly to startups, because what are startups all about? It's about going faster to market and building working software in a very short time frame. We also left some open-ended questions to our participants. One of the questions that's on a lot of people's mind is the famous Spotify model. I'm sure every one of you have heard about it. And many companies, they think that this is the silver bullet. Should we also now start doing the whole squad chapter tribe? And will we be successful as Spotify if we just adopt whatever has worked for Spotify? And no, that has not been the case. And many people said why. And here are some of the top answers. One, and which is the most important one in my opinion, is the lack of knowledge and mindset. There are gaps in skills and competencies. Of course, budget constraints, And without the right amount of investment, it always fails. And here's another important thing. Not all functions are involved in the transformation. And obviously, the thing that we always hear, the lack of support from senior leadership and management, it has to be both ways, both tops down and bottoms up. Incorrect or improper implementation, we understand it all completely incorrect and do it just for the sake of practice. And there is an alignment missing from the organization. And also some sort of resistance to change and reluctancy in adopting these practices. Does these all resound with you? There were many more responses, and hopefully some of them are resounding with what has happened in your organizations. Well, coming to the last question of the survey, what is the future of Agile according to you? That was the question that is on everybody's mind, and hopefully our speakers and panelists will be able to answer that for you. But here is what the participants thought. There will be more wider acceptance and adoption. Maybe there'll be more coordination and there'll be all the teams will be coming together to implement Agile. There'll be a mindset change. And there'll be a new bar for competitive business. Maybe the bureaucratic methodologies will be limited, and those bridges and barriers will be broken, and decision making will be enabled for all participants. We'll be delivering product faster to market, more innovation, quality, and productivity will be increasing, and it'll become cost effective. This Agile adoption is what is going to future-proof an organization. That's a very interesting thought. Teamwork will increase and help build trust. I can relate to that. The workflows will be streamlined and process will become much more efficient, obviously. And it will be adopted in many sectors, not just software. That is definitely something that we will be talking about. And it will become more relevant for value-driven investment. And this topic today, very much significant. And it's not just today we'll be talking about it, but we will also be talking more about this in our upcoming India Confluence that is set to happen on 6th through 9th July. With that, I'm going to turn it over and here's the agenda for the day. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Anand Deshpande, who's going to deliver the keynote on 20 years of Agile Manifesto and what's next. Dr. Anand Deshpande is the founder, chairman, and managing director of Persistent Systems. And he holds a business BTech in computer and science engineering from IIT, and also an MS and PhD in computer science from Bloomington, Indiana. And he's the true visionary and the driving force behind the growth of Persistent Systems from its inception. And his experience and his knowledge about this wide field makes him the most relevant person to deliver this keynote today. I kindly welcome Dr. Anand to deliver the keynote for the day. Over to you, Dr. Anand. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you let me just get my screen set up. Great. So it's a real pleasure to be here at a Zenov event to talk about the 20 years of Agile Manifesto and what's next. One part I wanted to mention here, and I'm going to go and historically date myself a little bit. I had the opportunity of working in this area when in my first job after my PhD, I worked at Hewlett-Packard Laboratories as part of the software engineering environments group. And those were the early times of people that we work with, including Barry Beam from the USC. We had a partnership with several other people who eventually became founders of ClearCase, and some of the work that happened out of the Grady Booch and the whole rational related stuff. So I had an opportunity to be at the exciting part during the early parts of this thing. So clearly we are celebrating today the 20th anniversary of the great Agile Manifesto. But before we go too far, I wanted to ask this question. So why did we need an Agile Manifesto in the first place? And if we needed one, why did we need one in 2001? And we have been writing code pretty much since the 1950s. And clearly software engineering has been around for a while. And why did we have to pick up Agile Manifesto in 2001? So I'm going to trace a very brief history of the software industry and what the challenges were and how this evolved and what led to the Agile Manifesto first, and then spend a little bit of time trying to explain to you what I believe are my opinions moving ahead and what might be the next set of things. So clearly the Apollo program was considered a huge success, but by and large, software in the 60s and 70s was pretty much considered a train wreck. A lot of disasters, a lot of delays, and many challenges. One of the earliest, it was kind of at that point, software and writing code was considered an art. And this set of books that are very famous, written by none other than Donald Knuth, talks a lot about the art of computer programming. And he started writing these books in 1968. So even he felt that programming was really an art. And in some cases, it was even considered magic art in some sense. One of the earliest chronicles around the kind of challenges that we see in software were from Fred Brooks. And Fred Brooks used to be an executive at IBM and then eventually became a professor in North Carolina. And he wrote a very seminal book in this area called The Mythical Man Month. Even though the book is fairly old now, it's from 1975, I highly recommend you all to read this book. It's got some amazing stories of software in the early days. And there is a 1987 article on IEEE computer that is very important. I think the key thing in these articles was that when they were comparing software as compared to hardware, which was already moving at Moore's law pace, and you could see the amazing investments, average software projects were 50% late, half the projects were operational but not exactly successful, and most of the product failures were there because they did not meet customer requirements. And by the time we came to the early 80s, there was a consensus that because of lack of agreement on requirements and the ability to uh, fix those or understand really what meant that you had a lot of feature creep, and fixing bugs early was found to be significantly better than finding them later. So if you could find the bugs early, you could fix them better, it would be much faster and cheaper. So there was this whole method around that, and that led to what was known as the waterfall model. So the idea is that before you get to the next stage, get the commitments, rule out the bugs as you can as early as possible in the process, so that when you get to the next phase of the process, they are already cleaned up and you don't have to go back and fix them and spend the time on testing and deployment and all of that. So this was pretty much how this happened. And the DoD was very supportive of this model. There were many IEEE standards that were written about how software should be delivered in these kinds of contexts. On a personal side, I was quite actively, we had started Persistent by this time, and we were working with Microsoft very closely in the early 90s. And Windows NT was one of the versions that really got delayed. And we personally, at some sense, we benefited from this delay because we got a chance to work with a Fortran compiler that we would not have gotten to work with if NT had shipped on time. But because of these delays, which were all written up a lot, Microsoft went into overdrive to try to see what kind of processes are needed, how do you build all these processes, and how do you fix the setup. And one of the seminal books around that time, which I think is still worth reading, is this Kusumano Selby book on Microsoft Secrets. This would have been from the early 90s, 93, 94, 95 timeframe. And there was a lot of discussion on how Microsoft improved their processes. And a lot of energy was spent by Microsoft in trying to encourage people to write code which was cleaner. And there was this set of trilogy of books around Code Complete, Solid Code, and Rapid Deployment that were pretty much the standard Bible for everyone who was writing code at that time. In the early years of Persistent, I was very influenced by these two books. One is this Principles of Software Engineering and Management, and then Developing Products in Half the Time. So this particular book by Smith and Rhinestone, they have written this book about Black & Decker and how Black & Decker was able to improve the development process very effectively. Very nicely written books, all pre-Agile in some sense. Around 89, Watts Humphreys, who used to be at the Software Engineering Institute in Carnegie Mellon, wrote this book called Managing the Software Process. And then eventually wrote this book called The Discipline for Software Engineering, which was all a precursor to the CMM model. So this was really where it went. And we had this model of 5-step CMM 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this came in from the Software Engineering Institute at this Carnegie Mellon University. And India was very active in the CMM thing. Pretty much every company jumped into the CMM bandwagon. This is a very famous book written by Pankaj Jalote around the time Infosys went through this whole process. Motorola India Software was the first CMM5 certified lab anywhere in the world. And Infosys was one of the first Indian software outsourcing companies to be CMM5 certified. CMM was a very popular thing in India. Every company pretty much said that they need to be CMM5. If you look at government RFPs today, pretty much all of them refer to companies needing to be CMM5 as one of the requirements. And this was a very active thing to the extent that I knew a few companies that did CMM5 even before they wrote the first code. So it's kind of ironic that you have a business which has no software business to start with, but is already certified at CMM5 because they had the processes all in place. From our side at Persistent, we struggled to get into the CMM5 kind of bandwagon. We tried a couple of times, but we never could make it. And that's when we started to differentiate ourselves as outsourced product development. And to do that, one of the things that we found is that CMM was pushing IT outsourcing processes around the software development lifecycle, where you have well-defined requirements and you did trade-off between time and effort. We were more actively working with product companies, and product companies typically followed PDLC, which is the product development lifecycle, where the time was fixed, the effort was fixed, and the trade-off was mainly on the requirement side. So you got to define requirements per cycle, and this sort of was a precursor of the agile development stuff in that context. Taking the discussion back to 2001, clearly by this time, the process groups in companies were very dominant, and people had missed out the fact that, we were building software, we were working with individuals, and the entire process about how you build software was all about these CMM type, very heavy software processes. So when these 17 leaders met in Utah, they were sort of very keen to see how to rewrite the manifesto. And some of the key things that you note in the way they defined it, it was sort of a rebel movement against the process movement that had become very common with the DoD and the CMM structures going in fairly active. And this is sort of where it came in. And over the years now, we have multiple frameworks and lots of development processes. And it's become, again, large number of options. And I'm really looking forward to Scott in his presentation, where he has been thinking about all of these issues and has suggested a methodology which is excellent. And I'm sure he will talk more about it. But essentially, we are starting to see a whole mix of processes and ideas and things that need to be done. And I wonder if we have gone, the pendulum has swung again in the other direction. Are we getting too process oriented and not thinking about the individual's processes and the software artifacts that we are building? So as I look ahead now, and what has changed since 2001 that we sort of look at it ahead in the next 20 years that we have seen since 2001 to 2021, and what is different now, and does the software manifesto, the Agile manifesto fit in the context of 2021, and what might be everywhere ahead? So clearly the first, I think, important thing to note is that post the great article by Mark Andreessen, that software is eating the world, every business has become a software-driven business. So software is no more written by just people from the software companies, but it is being written by people across every company, and every business has become a software-driven business. There has been a lot of buzz around this whole concept of two pizza teams, so teams that take full accountability and ownership with aligned incentives. So instead of having this model of saying we have one team that does development, one team does the testing, and on so on, we are now sort of moving into a full team that is two pizza teams, a small team that does everything around the product end to end, starting from dev, test, QA, everything. And then clearly we see a big trend around improved abstractions and automation and various other things. And the comment that I would make here, and this is something that everyone needs to note, is that the effort required for the same work is going down drastically or exponentially, depending on who you ask. But the fact is today we need many fewer people, far fewer people today than we used to need in the previous generation of software as it was written. So today teams are becoming far more efficient. You have better tools to write code, and things are starting to happen in a much more different way as compared to the previous world. So how does Manifesto have to be relooked at in this new context? And finally, AI has come in everywhere. It's, in my opinion, we are still on the runway as far as the AI is concerned, but in the next few years, it's absolutely set for takeoff. So looking ahead, so I just wanted to comment a bit on how Agile has evolved, and I sort of mentioned this in the context of the two pizza teams. So clearly, design, implementation, testing have started to coalesce. We start to see teams that combine design, test, implementation already. And this is sort of what you see in the two pizza teams or full stack development or any of the concepts that we hear. A developer is not restricted to either just design, implementation, or testing, but they are responsible for the entire process of dev test, and now including the way things have moved, including the ops. So now we have this whole DevOps test, everything all part of it. So while this has been going on and we have seen tremendous success in the DevOps world, and there is a full sort of methodology and strategy of how people are building code using tools all the way from coding to operations, and then back taking that feedback and feeding it back into the next round of operations. And this has really helped in building code where we are shipping products very frequently, and some of the best ones are shipping several times a day. So this whole cycle of how fast you are building code and deploying it has really improved in the last 20 years. As we start looking at DevOps, and I find that I'm very intrigued and excited by the sort of the changes that I have seen around site reliability engineering and SRE. So as DevOps has become mainstream, the top companies led by Google have taken a fresh look. So what they started to say is that, traditionally people who did the operations work tended to be those who were system administrators and people who were just operating things, and they were looking at things as to saying, how do I go implement this or deploy this or that? So one of the ideas that Google said is that let me put the best programmers and kind of ask them to relook at how software DevOps is working, and can we do it in a way where we can reduce the organizational silos, assume that failure is normal, build out reliability by assuming how to manage failures and work against failures rather than tracking failures and dealing with them. And then they all talked about how you would do these changes gradually and incrementally, but do them continuously in some ways. And then one of the most important things that I have found in terms of how SRE has been looking at this is to try to put in automation to, get rid of processes that have been very tedious and measuring everything. I'm quite excited about how SRE has evolved in the last few years, and I somehow believe that SRE would be a good place for the future of development as well. So while SRE started out as being something that is used for operations and monitoring, I believe that SRE principles will start to come in very handy into the coding and testing and various other changes that we see. So before I conclude, I want to make one bold claim. And my claim, this is a 20-year horizon claim. I believe that artificial intelligence will change the way we write code. Everyone will write code, and most of us will write very little code. So this is really what I believe is going to happen. So everyone will have to write code in the sense that coding will not be restricted to only those who are programmers or whose job it is to code, but everyone will be writing their own sort of add-ons or in some ways programming their interfaces or whatever else. So everyone will be effectively programming their VCR or anything else that they might do. But to program any of this stuff, you will have to write very little code because most of the code will get generated. So this is sort of my bold claim for the next 20 years. I'd love to, have people disagree with this or comment on that. The challenge that I see right now in terms of the programming environment as to where the next frontier is and where some research and activity needs to happen is around requirements. So while it was identified in the 80s that requirements was a big challenge, and the whole reason for Agile was to ensure that the requirements, implementation, dev, test all happened in shorter cycles, as we get to an AI-led programming environment where coding is not going to be necessary and machines are going to write code, how are we going to specify our requirements for the machine? So that's really going to be the biggest challenge. And I think that's where some research and new activity has to happen. And I'm quite confident that you will see some new action in this area. And then the now opportunity that I want to share with all of you is the following, that I believe that the top 20 companies, and I'm just making 20 as a number, but when we work with some of these companies who have the sort of the best of class DevOps plus test, QA test, DevOps, and SRE implemented, they are delivering software almost at 2 orders of magnitude more efficiently as compared to the laggards. And I see that difference actually starting to get starker and starker as we look ahead. So the well-oiled machines are delivering software at a much better efficiency, fewer people, less time cycles, more and more releases, and better speed at which they are delivering stuff. And I want to leave this as an opportunity for the Indian software industry into saying that, does it make sense for the Indian software industries to look at some of the processes and methodologies that these top 20 companies may be using and make sure that we can actually democratize this whole activity of software development across the industry so that we can build as efficient software as these top companies build for everyone in the universe. So that's really where I want to stop. I don't know if we have time for questions. I'm going to hand it back to Zinov to see what may be the best way forward. But thank you very much for being here. I'm really looking forward to the panel and the next session by Scott. So look forward to it.
Thanks, Anand. Thanks for your keynote. We do have got a few questions, and Sangeeta will be asking to you. Sangeeta, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Anand. Thank you for that very insightful speech that took us over, the history of Agile Manifesto, and also talked about what is currently happening in the industry with the SRE and the merger of ops and DevOps, and also, the whole no ops concept, etc. And also, it's very intriguing to know that it's going to be AI taking over humans, even at the level of writing software. So thank you for all that wonderful insights. We have quite a few questions from our audience, and I'd like to start off by asking the first question is, what have you absorbed in terms of reluctancy from the company or management in adopting Agile? And I mean, if you can answer that, then I can go to the next follow-up question.
See, I think it depends on who you ask and what kind of companies you're working with. So some of the companies that are in the software product business clearly don't have a whole lot of hesitation on using Agile. Now, if you go to a big bank or something who have never used Agile, this whole concept of saying, you are not going to be able to give me one fixed bid, one delivery, one price for your entire project that you are doing. And you're not going to be able to say, okay, 3 months later, you have to have everything at the same price. That becomes a very tricky situation. And most of the people, especially those who are managing budgets and senior executives, always like to have saying, okay, I need a fixed price and a fixed time and a fixed everything. And typically people spend a lot of time in making requirements, but their requirements by the time they come to implementation are outdated. So this whole concept that we are going to work together to build the product that is necessary or build a solution that's necessary is a concept that's very alien for people in general. And that's where I think you see the greatest hesitation in some sense from the market that we work with.
And I think a follow-up question in that is like, the management really thinks that Agile is like a silver bullet and they just throw that term at you and, but they don't give enough times for the teams and to understand that at the very beginning, be a small dip in the delivery process or delay, but as the teams are learning this, right, and then they get over that curve. So what do you suggest should be the companies do in order to overcome these hurdles?
It's a tricky question, right? Again, on one side, you of course find that everyone, when you are in the sales process, people tend to tell the executives, oh, no worries, your requirements, we'll take them till the end and we'll keep working on them and we'll evolve as we go along. And, it's all agile and all of that stuff. So you get into all kinds of misconnects between people in the understanding of what agile really is, and then you get into all kinds of issues because people don't appreciate that at the end of it, things need to be built. On the other hand, I also believe that many of us in the software community are not being very truthful in both following agile and also explaining to people what agile can do and what it cannot do. And we end up trying to, when we are in the early part of the process, we make certain commitments, and at the end of the process, we kind of change them. And a lot of people I see follow waterfall model with, so people think that daily stand-ups is enough for calling anything agile. So there is a big gap in terms of what needs to get done. And I'm really looking for Scott to sort that problem out. He's the real expert. I'm a business guy. I am a salesman. So I'm not really a practitioner on a day-to-day basis.
Right, thank you. We have like so many questions flowing in.
Maybe we should take them all at the end. You may, if you want, let's sort of push them into the panel if you want. If there's something specific that you think I should answer, I do. But otherwise, I think we are looking forward to Scott, making sure that these questions don't exist by the time he's done.
Sure, absolutely, Dr. Anand. But maybe we can take just one or two more questions quickly. I mean, one very interesting question, basically, when you talked about why these principles were invented in the first place in 90s. If all of these are so relevant, why was it not just possible to leapfrog to agile right from the beginning? Why did we have to go through this whole non-agile approach and then evolve? Why this
it's evolution, right? Meaning we didn't become humans on day one. We were monkeys before we became humans, right? So it takes time for things like this to happen, and there is a certain set of evolution that happens. So when you started programming in the 50s, you didn't know enough about what could happen. So you couldn't have made up agile in the 1950s or 60s or 70s or 80s. And even now, 20, 30 years now, these are all evolutionary methods. As we go along, you will get better and better technology, you will get better infrastructure, and you will get better ways of solving it, and processes have to evolve. What I find, which is something that I want to leave with sort of the agile community or community, stop thinking about everything as a ritual and a fixed model. The whole point of Agile Manifesto was that, hey, think about people, think about what we are trying to do, don't get stuck on the processes. And I think sometimes the people who are running these agile processes get very stuck on the process aspects of it or the rituals aspect of it, rather than thinking about what we are doing. So it's an evolutionary model. We will evolve. Tools, technology, software, everything is evolving. Processes will also have to evolve to go up with that. I think I'm going to stop here and hand it to Scott, if you don't mind. We'll take these questions. If you want, you can send them to me by email. I'll send them back. I'm really anxious to hear Scott, so I don't want to suck up his time.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Anand. Thank you for that.
My pleasure. It's a real pleasure talking to you all. Thank you.
And yeah, we are also very excited to hear from Scott Ambler, Vice President and Chief Scientist. And he is a practitioner of Disciplined Agile Delivery Toolkit. I mean, what is Disciplined Agile Delivery?
Okay, let me, I'm sorry. Okay, I hope you can hear me. I've lost sound on my end, so I don't know if you can hear me now. Somebody give me a thumbs up. You can hear me? Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me to this event and taking time out of your busy day to listen to my what I would like to share with you today. So I loved Anand's presentation. I thought it was dead on, and everything he said was fantastic. And I'm also excited about AI. I've been following AI for almost 40 years now, and this is one of the few times, like this is basically the first time where I'm getting a sense for the AI community. It actually is going to get something done this time, and it has some real value to add. And because back in the past, it was wishful thinking that never really went anywhere. All interesting research stuff, of course, but not practical for the most part. So anyway, but we'll have to see. Who knows, right? But I highly suspect AI is definitely in our future. Well, it's actually right now in our present as well, but certainly in our future. So, but anyways, back on track here. So what I would like to talk about is choosing your wow, choosing your own way of working, and actually getting back to one of the original ideas that came out of the Agile community, and particularly the extreme programmers, that you should own your own process. You should choose your own way of working. And the question is how do you do that? And why, would you want to do that? So as you heard, I'm the co-creator of the Discipline Agile Toolkit, along with Mark Lyons. I'm the Vice President and Chief Scientist for Discipline Agile at the Project Management Institute. And we are moving forward with bringing DA out to the world, and some great ideas. So I'm going to do a very brief overview of a very big topic in 20 minutes. So anyways, there's a few issues I'd like to work through, but the first question is, and the survey we heard, the survey results we heard earlier are very similar to this. Are we there yet? Have we adopted Agile? Are we Agile organizations? And for the most part, the answer is no. Unfortunately, we're getting there, but it takes time. And what's interesting is for all the marketing and for all the rhetoric, we're not seeing as much benefit from adopting these frameworks like Scrum and SAFe and LeSS and many others as we're being told. Now, there's wonderful anecdotes, and some organizations are doing phenomenally well, or at least some teams are. But for the most part, on average, it's not working out as well as we'd like. And there's a few reasons why, which I'll talk about. But I think a lot of it is, what Anand was talking about earlier, was that there's too much focus on the process, and there's too much focus on, particularly on ceremonies, like running meetings and stuff like that, as opposed to doing the real work. So I think there's that as an issue, as well as bringing Agile out across the organization. We're hearing clearly that from some of the questions and survey results that this isn't happening as fast and as well as it should. So keep that in mind as I overview what DA is all about. So anyway, so what is DA? What is Discipline Agile? Discipline Agile is a toolkit. It's not a framework. So where the frameworks like SAFe and Scrum, which are wonderful, they clearly bring some potential benefit. The frameworks tell you what to do. They narrow your options. They present ideas as best practices, and they tell you, here's what you need to do in order to succeed. And the problem with that is it doesn't respect the context that you face, because everybody is unique. Every team is unique. Every organization is unique. You face unique problems. The situation is constantly changing. So so what is a good practice or effective practice for you might be a phenomenally bad idea for somebody else, and vice versa, right? So different people in different situations will work in different ways. This is blindingly obvious. Yet the frameworks tell you, here, follow these best practices, follow these ceremonies, and everything will work out for you. And the answer is no. It simply is not working out as well as they're promising, and then the numbers just don't show, don't match their claims. So how can we work better? So the scope of Discipline Agile has grown over the years. It started originally at IBM as Discipline Agile Delivery, one of these 24 hexes that you see here. These hexes are what we call process blades or process areas, and they're different aspects of an organization. So most organizations, particularly medium and larger sized ones, have these explicit job functions or process areas within them. Smaller ones and startups are still doing these things, but they're growing into them, and it might not be completely explicit yet. It's certainly implicit, but not explicit. So the idea is, how can we be effective and, more importantly, learn how to improve in all aspects of our organization, and how does it all fit together, and how do we affect each other? So, because Agile isn't just for software development. One of the challenges we heard from the survey was, how do we bring Agile out to the rest of the world? To the rest of finance. How do we bring it to finance? How do we bring it to the marketing people, to the governance effort, to the HR, the people management effort, the enterprise architects, and so on? How does this all fit together, and how do we improve and learn as an organization over time? And because that's what it's really all about. It's not about adopting a framework. It's not about adopting Agile. It's about becoming a learning organization. It's about getting better at getting better. And these are, Anand was talking about these top 20 organizations and how much better they are than the rest of us. And they're not, there's nothing special about them. They're not naturally better. They didn't just luck out. They worked hard. They improved over time. So they might be, 100 times better than you are today. But 20 years ago, they probably were a little bit better than you, but they improved over time. They just kept getting better and better and better and better. And now they're significantly better than you and way ahead of you. So how do you catch up? So I'm going to show you how to catch up, or at least narrow the gap a bit. So the DA toolkit is this comprehensive agnostic toolkit. So where the Scrum the Scrum Guide, which is a wonderful piece of work, it's a 13-page body of knowledge. So there's a few details missing. The Choose Your WOW book, which is just focused on software development on team agility, is 400 pages. Because we address a few more issues. You get into some of the details that get glossed over by some of the frameworks. So there's nothing wrong with Scrum. It's great. I love it. But we need to recognize that it's limited, it's small, and it focuses on a few things and a few important things, but it purposely misses a lot of other things. So keep that in mind. We're about to hit a diagram. We'll make it blatantly obvious what I'm getting to. And here it is. So anyways, so here is actually, we didn't talk about this at all, but earlier Anand was talking about, one of the great issues that we need to address in the community is how do we approach requirements? Well, this is one aspect of requirements. How do we explore scope? And this is something called a goal diagram. So it's a way that we summarize the choices that you have and the decisions that you need to make. So when we're exploring, or at least you need to consider. So when you're exploring scope, you have to address the issues like, well, how are people going to use this system, this solution that we're producing? How are we going to explore the domain, like explore the data aspects of things? How are we going to explore the business process? How are we going to explore the user interface, the usability aspects? How are we going to explore quality requirements, like all the ILDs, that are absolutely critical to drive our testing strategy and drive our architecture decisions? How are we going to go about modeling and doing the exploration work, interacting with our stakeholders? How are we going to prioritize and manage these requirements? Like how do we go about these things, right? So there's a lot of issues around exploring scope, around exploring the requirements for what we're doing. And we make these explicit. And in DA, what we did, I'll go into more detail in a few slides, but we give you advice around what these techniques are all about and the trade-offs associated with them. So that way you can choose the techniques that make sense for you in the situation that you face. So instead of telling you, here's the one or two techniques that you explore requirements with, we instead say, well, these are the issues you need to think about. Here's some options for you to address these issues. You choose the right ones for you. So it's the equivalent of, so the frameworks are like telling you, oh, you want to have a meal today? You want to have lunch today? Well, here's the fast food special. Here's the McChicken burger and fries and a Coke. And that's what you're going to have because that's the best meal, because that's what we want to sell you. Whereas this is the equivalent of, here's a bunch of ingredients and let us help you make your own meal so that way you can eat healthy and you can eat something that actually meets the needs of your family as opposed to the McChicken deal. And by the way, you're going to have the McChicken meal for every meal for the rest of your life because that's what we want to sell you. And maybe at some point we'll start selling you an egg McMuffin or something as well, just to mix things up a bit. So we can do better than that. We need to do better than that. So what's interesting is that sort of put this in juxtaposition. The frameworks and the methods, what they do is they tell you best practices, what they believe to be best practices. So they limit your choices. They make the decisions for you, and that's easy, right? Some people just want to be told what to do. Well, eat the McChicken meal. Okay, fine. I'll have McChicken for lunch today, and tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after, and the day after that too. Because hey, McChicken, that's awesome. But they've effectively redacted your choices, your software engineering choices, and your choices for doing your job. And so I would argue one of the reasons why we're sort of messed up now in the software world on requirements, because that certainly was not the case in the 90s. It might have been in the 80s, but there was a renaissance in the requirement space in the 90s. And then we killed it off with the Agile movement because everything was the user story. or an epic, if you got to get really complicated. So we need to do better than this. So how? So another idea I want to point out, and I mentioned this earlier, is it's not, your job is not to adopt an agile framework. That might be a good starting point. Don't get me wrong. It's great to adopt Scrum. It's great to adopt SAFe. There are benefits for doing so, but it's not your endpoint. So what you really want to do is think of your organizational transformation as a journey from point A to point B, or from journey of starting wherever you are today and becoming a learning organization like the Amazons and the eBays of the world, these organizations that are significantly more effective than you. And the reason why they're more effective than you is because they've been doing this process improvement stuff for several decades now, and they're just way ahead of you because they've been working on it while you've been fooling around and adopting frameworks. So align yourself, figure out where start where you are, then get on, start to learn how to improve, learn how to get better. And I'm going to walk through a few techniques really quickly to do that. And then what you really want to do is get to the point where you've become a learning organization. You've learned how to learn, you've learned how to improve. And this is much different than learning how to just follow a bunch of practices or a bunch of ceremonies. So just to review the idea again, so you assess, you start where you are, you get aligned, figure out what your starting point is. So think of it as, you're at one point in the city and you've got to get home, right? And there's many ways you can get from point A to point B. You can take a bus, you can drive a motorcycle, you can walk, you can take a subway perhaps if it's available to you. You can take get a taxi. There's many different ways and many different routes to get to home, to get to this what you want, this learning organization. So if your strategy to become a learning organization, if you're brand new to Agile, there's a way to do. There's different ways of doing that, but that'll be different than if you desperately need to change really quickly. Like there's ways you can shorten a transformation. It gets very expensive and very, very risky, but you can pull that off, as opposed to a safer, longer-term greenfield adoption. If you're an existing SAFe shop, then your starting point is different. It's SAFe, and because we know what SAFe is all about, and we know what the challenges are with SAFe, and what the advantages and disadvantages are of SAFe, the adoption to move away from SAFe and to become a learning organization to improve upon SAFe is different than if you're new to Agile, right? Because once we, if you're truly doing SAFe or something close to SAFe, then chances are pretty good you're suffering from a certain collection of problems, a certain collection of challenges. And because we know that, well, if you've got this challenge, well, there's different ways to get out of that and improve away and solve that problem. Similarly with Scrum, Scrum has a common set of challenges, and once you recognize, oh, it's a Scrum shop, well, okay, boom, 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 boom. Here's what your problems are going to be, and here's different ways you can move away from that. So let's get on the improvement path here. Or maybe you're just, maybe you're doing really well in the software area, but your marketing team is struggling with Agile, or your HR group is struggling with Agile, or your enterprise architects or your procurement people are struggling with Agile. So transforming those groups is collections of those groups is a different animal than transforming the entire organization from scratch or from SAFe or from whatever. So different organizations are in different situations. So they will follow different paths to get to the real destination, which is to become a learning organization that knows how to get better at getting better. So the point I want to make is that it's not Discipline Agile versus SAFe, or Discipline Agile versus Scrum or Spotify or whatever. It's SAFe plus Discipline Agile, or SAFe or Spotify plus Discipline Agile. So if you're doing any of these methods, well, that's your starting point. Great, good for you. How can we improve from there? How can we get better? Because that's what you really want to do. So how do we do that? Well, how did the Amazons of the world get as good as they are? How did they become 2 orders of magnitude better than some of the not so good organizations out there? Or if you're a mid-range organization, maybe they're only 1 order of magnitude better than you, right? Or 1.5 orders of magnitude better than you. But still, they're doing significantly better than you. How did they get there? Well, they did it one small step at a time. They didn't adopt these frameworks, or if they did, they looked at them and then they moved on, including Spotify, by the way. Earlier we were talking about Spotify. Well, if you actually read about Spotify, the very first thing they tell you is don't adopt this method. That's the very first thing out of their mouths. Because what Spotify did was they learned how to learn. They followed a process like this, where they made a bunch of small improvements over time, and that's how they did. So, and they've moved beyond what people consider the Spotify method, by the way. Because that was like almost 10 years ago now for them. They've moved way beyond that. They're not doing that anymore. So, because what they are doing, they're doing this. They're improving over time. So the question, though, becomes, how do you get better at this? Because where are the challenges with this approach? So where are the challenges with this small, incremental improvements over time? And this, by the way, is a basic lean technique from total quality management like 30, 40 years ago. So this is this Kaizen approach to continuous improvement is a well-proven technique that's been around for decades. So where are the problems? Well, the problem is in this third step. So when we try out a new technique or a new potential way of working, we need to experiment with it. We need to give it a try and see what happens. Does this technique work for us is the question we're trying to answer. And the challenge is that some of these experiments fail. And there's a lot of really good rhetoric around this. Well, it's not really a failure because you're learning what doesn't work. If you're smart, you fail fast as opposed to fail slowly. All this wonderful rhetoric. But the fact is you're still failing. And if you're the person paying the bill, it's not that attractive hearing all this fail fast nonsense, right? Can you fail less often? Can you be smarter about the experiments that you're running? So yes, failing fast is significantly better than failing slowly. So, that's a win. Can we succeed earlier is a valid question. Can we be smarter about the way we do this? And the answer is yes. With a little bit of humility, if you recognize that you're not a leading edge organization, more than likely you're not a leading edge organization like these other companies, and that in fact you are dealing with problems that have been solved by many people before you, or at least similar problems that have already been solved, you could probably learn from their learnings. You do not have to reinvent the wheel unless you truly are on the bleeding edge. So the observation I want to make is that if we can get better at identifying the potential techniques to experiment with, then what will happen if we make better decisions, then we will have fewer failed experiments. Because when we make a better decision, we'll more than, if we can get good at identifying something that's probably going to work for our situation, then we'll have fewer failures. Nobody's perfect. You're still going to have some failures, but you're going to have a lot less. So your process improvement will be cheaper and it'll be faster, just by being a little bit smarter about the way that you choose to experiment with things. So how do you do that? Well, if you have access to great coaches who have been there, done that, and can give you advice, and you're willing to follow their advice, that's the problem with coaching, then yes, that's great. But can you find these people? Can you afford them? Can you keep them? Easier said than done. A lot of people claim to be coaches. Not as many people are as good at being coaches as the people who are claiming to be good coaches. So you got to be careful with that. And I'm a firm believer in coaching. Don't get me wrong. Firm believer in coaching. Or if you have access to a process toolkit like DA that can help you identify techniques that are more than likely going to work for you in your situation, you'll make better decisions. So this is what DA is all about. We can teach you how to do this. So how does that work? So this is a technique that we call guided continuous improvement, because by being willing to follow a little bit of advice, by learning how to use the toolkit, you can make better decisions and thereby improve faster. So how does it work? So we saw this diagram earlier, this goal diagram of exploring scope. Well, if you're a requirements expert, then this is basically a checklist for you. And because I can look at this and go, oh yeah, we've got a problem here. And more than likely the UML state chart is what we want to do. And okay, here's how we do it. Because I've done these things. I know all this stuff. But say you're not a requirements expert. So, say nobody on your team has this background. Well, you've got a problem, right? So what do? Well, we realize, if we have a certain problem, we realize, you know what? We're having a problem exploring how people are going to use this system. And, we're using we're using user stories and epics, but we're just not getting the job done. Well, look at this. There's actually more options than just epics and user stories. Well, okay, fine. Let's go and do a little bit of reading. Now, if like I said, if we were experts, then the diagram was more than enough. But if we're not, then we can dive down to the next level of detail. This is why it's a 400-page book, or I don't know how many bytes it is on the digital version online, but it's a 400-page book. So we go into the book and we do a little bit of reading. So we say, oh, look, here's all these different techniques, and here's these trade-offs. So I can't tell you what the best practices are because I don't know about your situation, but you know about your situation. You know who's on your team. You know what you're trying to do. You know what your strengths and weaknesses are. You know what your skills are. You just might not know about the techniques because you're not process experts, and that's okay, right? So as long as you know how to traverse the toolkit, you can very quickly, home in on techniques that more than likely will work for you. And in this case, whatever this person's whatever this team's issues were, they talked it out, and there was, what, maybe, experimenting with personas is the way to go here. Let's try that. Okay, so we can narrow down our options to something that's more than likely going to work for us. So let's experiment with that technique. Try it out for a sprint or two, see what happens. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then we'll try something else. So we can have more intelligent experiments and have fewer failures. So this level of skill, so at the individual and team level, this techniques works very well. And this is what we teach in our Discipline Agile Scrum Master and Discipline Agile Senior Scrum Master certifications, if you're interested in learning about these techniques. In the toolkit itself, if you remember what those 24 hexes I very briefly overviewed, one of them was this is at the team level. I'm sorry. At the team level, we talk about not only do we tell you how to traverse these goal diagrams in order to learn various techniques, we also eat our own cooking. So we describe how do you evolve your way of working in terms of, well, here's a bunch of options for doing exactly that. And then, just like we saw for Explore Scope, that we had options and details and behind it, same thing for evolving your way of working. So it's the same sort of idea, because one strategy, one technique is not going to get the job done for process improvement either, right? Got to give you choices. Another challenge, and the survey sort of got at this, was the survey we heard about earlier sort of got at this, is one of the challenges that we see in our organizations is our agile team, like our delivery teams, our software teams might be very good at being agile because there's all this literature and all this help for software development teams to become agile. But then what happens, we're not autonomous. One of the great myths of the agile community is that our teams are autonomous. This simply is not true. They're semi-autonomous. We have these 2 pizza teams and all this sort of stuff. But for example, my supposedly autonomous team still needs to get funding from the finance group, the people with the money. Right? They got to fund my project. So I got to interact with them somehow. But the problem is, well, what do you do when the finance team doesn't want to work in an agile manner because they're still doing annual budgeting, for example, right? Well, that really sort of hampers your ability to be agile. Or what happens if the HR people aren't working in an agile manner? I need to add somebody to my team really quickly. Well, it's going to take several weeks. No, I need them now. Right? Stop fooling around. Get me somebody. Or what happens if my release management people, the people I got to work with to release something into production because we're not quite doing DevOps yet? What happens if they're not doing DevOps yet? I got a problem, right? So, but I still got to work with them. How do we work with them in an agile manner? How do I convince them to try a new technique in order to be more effective? Because now we have to experiment with a cross team. We got to learn how to experiment with a new technique that's going to affect 2 teams, and these 2 teams have very different priorities, very different groups of people, very different ways of looking at the universe. And in this case, my team is a lot more agile than this other team over here. So let's work through how do we solve that problem? That's a fair question. So let's work through this issue of the finance team is misaligned with agile, is the nice way to say that. Well, look at the goal diagram. So my finance team wants to work in a reasonably traditional manner. There's, they want me to put in a formal request for money. It's basically a fixed price approach. Those are reasonably effective ways of working. And if you look, these lists with arrows beside them are basically a maturity model. So when you see a list like this, with, in this case, all 3 of them are ordered, what that says is that the strategies towards the top of the list are generally more effective than the strategies towards the bottom of the list. So my finance team, for whatever reason, is choosing to follow a reasonably ineffective way of funding agile software development teams. And they probably, and they truly believe in this. They're not doing it for the sheer joy of doing it. They believe in what they're asking for. They might not know there's better options. They might not understand the impact of what they're asking for. They probably don't realize that they're increasing the financial risk on my project in their efforts to minimize it. So we have to have an intelligent conversation. But if nobody on my team understands finance and can speak intelligently to finance, then we're never going to get out from under their thumb, right? So we need to coach between teams, right? And the coach has to understand, well, here's what the software team is trying to achieve. Here's what these finance people are trying to achieve. Let's work together to identify a better strategy that we can experiment with, and let's find out if it works for us in our situation, right? And let's do this in a fail-safe type of a manner. So this is what we teach in the Discipline Agile Coach certification. And then, of course, value streams, right? So a value stream, how do you bring products and services to the market? A value stream begins, ends, and hopefully continues with the customer in mind. So you go through this process and you want to streamline all this. All this has to work together effectively. The process blades in the middle here are all supporting activities, are all part of the overall value stream, but they're indirectly involved with the value stream, might be a way of saying it, or they support the value stream. So we need to optimize the entire value stream, not just locally optimize around software development, or around portfolio management, around whatever. So in this case, maybe we've got a problem where our enterprise architects really aren't interacting well, or they're the current bottleneck in our value stream, and so we need to optimize that. So what do we do? Well, once again, right, we can go look at the goal diagrams. We whatever that problem is that we're facing on the enterprise architecture side of things. Well, once again, we've got options. Maybe there's better ways of working that we can experiment with and understand. So this is something we teach in the DAVSC, the Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant. How do we improve at the value stream and the organizational level at the bigger picture? So the point I want to make is that we can apply different categories of improvement at different levels of the organization using the toolkit to help various groups identify new ways and potentially better ways of working that they can experiment with and improve over time. And what happens is when you get into this mode where you're experimenting with a new technique, measuring it, adopting it if it works, abandoning it if it doesn't, this is how you improve over time. And then once you build that sort of a strategy into your DNA, this is when you become a learning organization. And this is what you really want. And this is what the Amazons of the world have done, and the Googles of the world have done. All these hyper-competitive organizations, they do this continuous improvement approach. My suggestion is that you can be even smarter than that, because you can leverage the learnings of other smart people who have come before you and adopt mostly known techniques if you choose to. Discipline Agile, like I was trying to point out earlier, one of those hexes is also around continuous improvement. So once again, there's a very wide range of techniques, some of which are coming from Spotify, some of which are coming from elsewhere. But there's a range of techniques that you can choose from to do continuous improvement and sharing your learnings across the organization as well. So once again, we're eating our own cooking. So just to wrap up here before we get to questions, a question I want to ask you, I want to leave you with this rhetorical question. Are you a follower or are you a leader? Right? Because I'm most of my presentation here today is to help you become leaders in the Agile community and leaders in process improvement. So think about that. So why is this important? Why is guided continuous improvement and similar techniques that we have in the toolkit should be of interest to you? Well, we've seen there are benefits to adopting the frameworks like Scrum and SAFe and LeSS and others. You definitely get a benefit, assuming you're successful with it, of course. But you do get a benefit, but you quickly peak out, because one of the challenges with the frameworks as well is they solve a certain problem, which is great. But once you solve the problem, they don't really have much more to offer you because they've limited, and you remember that, that redacted diagram, they've limited your choices, and they really don't tell you, other than hand waving and telling you to hire consultants, they don't really give you any advice for improving beyond what the framework tells you to do. So the firms that are really successful in the marketplace, like the Amazon and the Googles of the world, they take a continuous improvement approach. And this is why they're so far ahead of you now. With Discipline Agile, you can catch up. And or at least you can narrow the gap. You'll probably never catch up, but you can narrow the gap and improve faster and improve cheaper because you can leverage the learnings of the people that have come before you. By being behind, there's some advantage there by being behind. So our advice is start where you are. You're pretty much guaranteed to have to do that. Do the best that you can in the situation you face. You're professionals. I know you're doing that already, but always strive to get better. Always be trying to experiment, always be willing to learn. And I would advise you to adopt the learnings of others if you choose to. And it's an easy thing to do. So we're all about helping you to work smarter and giving you the skills to work smarter and to become change makers within your organizations. To help you improve your careers and to frankly have more enjoyable jobs, because why wouldn't you want to enjoy what you're doing? So there's a lot of great opportunity here if you want to take the next step in becoming agile and becoming more agile and all these good sorts of things. So I would ask you to don't trust me at all. Do some learning. Go off and do a little bit of research. Learn more about Discipline Agile. We've got a lot of great resources on the web for free. If you happen to be a PMI member, the Choose Your Well book is available to you as a PDF free of charge. If you're not a PMI member, then it's $20 US. So it's a fairly inexpensive book, particularly given that it's 400 pages of really solid material. So there's some great techniques there. So anyways, take time to give it a shot. So thank you very much. I might be running a bit late here, but hopefully I still have a bit of time for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Scott. And this was such a valuable, so many tips and techniques that we could actually take home and implement it in our own organization. I'm sure the audience was taking a lot of notes. I mean, I was wondering where was all of this when my organization was going through the journey, right? So thank you for all the tips from starting from an individual all the way to teams and organizations and, helping us learn about the importance of the continuous improvement and that being the key driving factor for agile adoption. So thanks for that. We do have a lot of questions, Scott, but owing to time, I'm going to one was, is this information freely available on internet or the disciplined agile?
Yeah. So if
techniques and
yeah, as you can see there right there, pmi.org/discipline-agile. There's a lot of information available. Like I said, the book is available free of charge to PMI members. If you're not a member, then the book itself is $20. It's really cheap. It's as inexpensive as you're going to get, and that's for both paper and electronic copy.
Great,
yeah.
thank you.
And if there's other questions, like Anand.
Yeah, just one more, and I thought this was a very interesting question. When we have all of these tips and tools, etc., doesn't the disciplined agile kind of limit the power of agile by giving a recipe for everything? I mean, we understand the concept of learning from what has already been done and not reinventing the wheel, but does it inhibit creativity and innovation?
No, I think it enables you to become more innovative. The reinventing the wheel, and that's fun. Without a doubt, it's fun to invent techniques. But for the most part, reinventing the wheel is a waste of time. You're much better to reuse. Start with a little bit of humility, and choose to reuse the learnings of others and leverage those, and then truly work on leading edge stuff. Right, like. Why would you want to spend the next couple of years reinventing test room development, for example? Like, what's the attraction of that? That's crazy. So I would just invite you not to and think of it this way. Like, if you think DA is limiting your innovation, well, holy crow! I'm not gonna go back to that slide. But if you remember that slide where I blacked out 95% of your choices, how the heck is that innovative? When they're not even telling you what to do. So, and Geetha, well, your question is, well, where was this when my organization was doing it? It was probably out there. It's been out there since the late 2000s, but you didn't know to look for it because you didn't even think to go looking for it. And your coaches didn't know any better either, right? And or maybe they were motivated not to tell you about it because it sort of destroys their business model. So it's harsh, but it's like you didn't know. I'm sorry, you didn't know to go look. So you could have leveraged that, but you didn't, right? And this is the challenge with techniques like mob programming. If you've never heard of mobbing, like there's a wonderful technique that may or may not be valuable to you, but you'd never know. Or the SRE techniques. If you don't even know to go look for them, or you don't know the language or the search terms to use, at best you're going to stumble into those. And some of those techniques on your own, you're not going to invent those on your own. You might stumble into one or two of them. You're not going to stumble into all of them because the Googles of the world have far more resources than you do. So so this is the thing. So I just go take a look what's there. Like it's interesting. Some of the comments, some of the feedback we always get from like experienced Scrum Masters and experienced coaches is along the lines of, wow, like like I've literally taught workshops where on the first day, the experienced Scrum Masters were just attitude cases going, I know everything there is to know. And by the end of the first day, the only response I've ever gotten is, oh my God, there's so much stuff here. It solves numerous. Not only do you solve the problems we've been struggling with for a long time, you've got multiple options to solve the problem. It's amazing. And there's all these other issues we haven't even stumbled into yet. We were years away from realizing we had these issues. So I agree with you. The power of it.
Yep, I agree with you, Scott. And I encourage all the audience to explore the toolkit and then decide what's relevant and not relevant. Yeah. Sorry, in the interest of time, though we have a lot of questions, we'll share that with you, Scott. We're going to move on to the panel discussion now. Thank you so much, Scott, once again.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, our last topic for the evening or the day, and we have a panel discussion that will discuss about Agile in the new normal world. We have Shailesh Chopra, Senior Director, Software Engineering from Dell, Vinay, an Enterprise Agile Coach from Pfizer, Gaurav Mittal, Product Leader, Intuit, Madhava Mantri, Senior Director, Cloud Engineering, ServiceNow. And to lead this panel and to facilitate this discussion, we have Padma Satyamurthy from Walmart Global Tech India, and she is an enterprise transformation leader. So Padma, over to you, and I'll hand it over to you to drive this conversation. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you, Zinnov team. It's very humbling experience to be speaking in front of legends, Dr. Anand and Scott. So I take it with utmost humility, and I have a great panel partners here with me, Vinaya, Shailesh, Gaurav, and Madhav. So happy to be talking to you all, and thank you, audience, for being here with us on a morning here. It's not easy to take out time in the morning. So thank you very much. And Zinnov, of course, thank you very much. So this is Padma. I'm the Enterprise Transformation Leader at Walmart. And without wasting much time, I'll ask all my co-panelists to just give a quick introduction to themselves, and we can kick off the panel here. So Gaurav, would you start with your intro?
Great. Thank you, Padma, for the kind words. And very good morning to everyone from my side as well. Thanks, Zinnov, for inviting me to this panel discussion. First, a few words, to introduce myself. I'm a successful entrepreneur and a product management leader with 20 plus years of industry experience, currently working with Intuit. I have done extensive work in the product strategy, product management, customer advocacy, and the value engineering side. I'm also a coach, advisor, and recurring speaker on topics like product market fit, customer acquisition and engagement, lean methodology, and how to build products that provide, persistent differential return. I hold close to 30 patents, and few of them are even classified as essential patents. My first brush with Agile was way back in 2005 when I was working with Nokia in Finland. At that time, Agile was presented as a new method of software development. Where I see Agile now and progressing more in future is that Agile is a mindset, not a methodology. An Agile mindset helps in business agility, which includes both the strategic ability and the operational agility. When I say strategic agility, I mean generating new products and services, and bring them to the new customers. And by operational agility, I mean, making existing businesses better. And we will talk more about this, in this panel discussion. But happy to be here and kind of have a discussion with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav. Madhav, can I request you to go next? Madhav from ServiceNow. Madhav, you're on mute. I can see you speaking.
Sorry with that. A wonderful, wonderful morning, and thank you for having me on this panel, Padma. Really appreciate. Thanks to Zinnov for choosing such a wonderful topic. Very, very close to a lot of our hearts today. People that grew up as engineers like me definitely take a lot of excitement in being part of this panel and being part of one of the audience of Anand's session this morning, followed by Scott's wonderful, wonderful sessions. A few words about me. I'm a true engineer at heart. I grew up as a software engineer, wrote tons of code, did my master's in computer science in the United States, worked in States for a few years before moving back to India, worked for several different enterprise level organizations. Before joining ServiceNow as a leader for cloud engineering and cloud automation. Very recently, a little over a year, I've been part of ServiceNow now. My agile journey, like Gaurav's was, probably many other panelists' journey, probably started 2 decades ago, when we were all toying with the idea of capability maturity models, repeatable processes, metrics management, and all that actually created an industry in itself, right? So people were creating careers. Like me, was creating a career from an engineering writing code to becoming a project manager at one point was viewed as a pride factor for a lot of us. And then we took it to the other extreme when it was becoming very invasive. One of the questions I saw from the audience also today, that people were becoming too invasive about managing metrics, right? So, and then Agile happened to a lot of us, people like researchers like Scott and other people actually invented this beautiful Agile world to us, where it became more people focused more on the results, interactions became more important, and not the dozens of books that we were writing at one point that were quickly getting outdated, right? So no, I actually were one of those people that actually ridiculed Agile to a big promoter of Agile today. So that's what I am. And look forward to a lovely discussion with this panel. Thank you, Padma.
Thank you, Madhav. Move to Shailesh Chopra from Dell.
Hey everyone, good morning. First of all, an absolute privilege to hear Anand and Scott in the morning. I couldn't have started with such a burst of energy, both of them, experience, authenticity, as well as sharing insights, right, which probably you can't get easily in next 20 years also. So thanks for setting this up, Zinnov. We appreciate that. I am having around 20 years of experience in tech industry, 17 years in Dell Technologies, of course, was part of EMC, and 2016 Dell and EMC came together. And we are Dell Technologies, right? So we're building software and appliances. If people who are working on software and people who are working on appliances, they know that there are two different methods to release to the end customers. So processes, while we do amplify our need to improve, we use them as means, but we don't really over-index or over-amplify that. That's the only prescribed method, right? So we stayed out of purist mindset and left the room on the table to improvise or tailor-made that. So we don't claim we are the purist. If you want verses of Agile from us, probably we are not the right person. But if you want to learn from us where we failed, where we learned, where we kind of succeeded, surely I look forward to share that experience today. I'm part of Dell Data Management Group. We started our journey in this group maybe a couple of years back. It taught us quite a lot of things, right? At that point in time, we were releasing products in 12 to 18 months range, right? But Agile taught us you can actually deliver value, incremental, meaningful, in less than a quarter. So we have offerings today, and couldn't have, if somebody would have asked me to put my money on how fast you can release the program. So probably a year is a stretch, an aspirational question, maybe 9 months to 10 months. But I think Agile and the methodology and the improvisation has taught us you can actually deliver smaller chunks, which still holds true value for the customer. So unlocking that true value in short period of time is a sense of us moving from a, I won't say just waterfallish, but maybe hybrid model to bit more closer, tightly aligned process, which embraces Agile, right? And you mentioned about when we're discussing about a case study, right? I was just looking at product one, but we'll talk about that later. What a case study pandemic has been. Pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and hopefully the time is quick when we say we'll talk about post-pandemic. But that taught us how to adapt to change, what things which are not in your control, how to be resourceful, how to be in present, right? So I consider that's a great case study if you want to reflect upon how you live, how you want to live the Agile values in principle. So I look forward to talking to my co-panelists and learn from them and take those learnings back to my organization.
Thank you, Shailesh. Thank you for being honest on the release cycle about a 1 year and 10 months there. So Vinaya, we'll move on to your introduction here.
Sure. Thanks, Padma. First off, I must mention the keynotes. Both the keynotes from Anand and Scott were awesome. And it really gave us a lot of food for thought. And you saw from the chats and the questions that was really thought-provoking. So thanks to Persistent and Zinnov for pulling this event together. And thanks for having me. The panelists are great, so I hope to learn a lot. I work with Fiserv as an enterprise agile coach. I started my career in the IT industry in development roles, and then I moved on to various delivery roles. And about a decade ago, 10 to 11 years ago, I moved to coaching. My coaching experience started with the theory of constraints implementation, followed by large-scale Kanban. And I'm very grateful for those roots because I really learned a lot through those experiences. And then Scrum, SAFe, Disciplined Agile, and various homegrown approaches are things that I've dabbled in. I'm currently in Fiserv, and we are taking a framework agnostic approach in my business unit, which really creates a lot of room for experimentation and creativity. So a lot of what Scott talks about in DA really resonates well with this approach. The earlier panelists mentioned the pandemic, very difficult to have a talk today without mentioning the pandemic. So I would just say that I think the pandemic is a forced disruption on us, on all industries, but it also presents a lot of opportunities that we should really respond to. And I'm waiting to see what the panel discussion takes us to. Thanks, Padma.
Thank you, Vinaya. Here. I'm the enterprise transformation leader at Walmart. And Gaurav, we should catch up on the Nokia journey. Incidentally, my Agile journey started with Nokia as well. I was with Wipro in 2005-06. And Nokia was one of our biggest customers. We were one of the biggest service providers. And Nokia was very clear, even service providers need to be agile. That was a very holistic approach that I can recollect 15 or 18 years back, where Nokia said only we will be agile and everybody else can be doing whatever they want. They never took that approach. Thanks to them, I entered that space, and then I never wanted to look back to any other field outside of that. So stayed back there. Been part of large transformations like Philips, Cineverse Mobile Technologies, and Lowe's, and currently with Walmart. So have domain experiences in fintech, retail, and healthcare predominantly. Also one of my favorite domains as well. So that's about me. And this is a big responsibility. I think Zinnov kind of played this trick. They had Dr. Anand to begin with, which was wonderful presentation, followed by Scott. So now the biggest responsibility on the shoulder for all of us is to keep the momentum going where they left off, because they have covered almost everything that we wanted to speak in the first place, and then also keep hold of our audience interest beyond what they have shared, very interestingly that too. So that's going to be a big task for all of us. So I hope all of us are going to make a great justice to the time that you are investing with us in this, with us in this. So thank you for this. And let me move on to the first question that we have. Actually, we as panelists actually have come together, brainstormed a lot what we can bring to the table with you all guys. So hope you enjoy these discussions with us. So one thing that we kind of keep discussing is the ability for an organization to adopt agile and build the agility within an organization. And we always see the debate in many forums that these two are not the same things. Adopting agile, I think Dr. Anand also was talking about, not just talking about the daily stand-ups and other things. And Scott gave us a much holistic view of what agile and agility will look like. But I want to hear from our panelists, what does this, what has been your experience between adopting agile and building agility within an organization? So I'll start this discussion with Madhava here. Madhava, coming from ServiceNow, what's been your experience on the two distinct or maybe similar concepts?
No, absolutely. They're quite distinct in the sense that honestly, it's a fantastic question, Padma. Thanks for asking, and thanks for choosing me to start this discussion. I may have a little bit of an engineering bias here, but technology, I think, adopted to agile fairly quickly. Given that it suited extremely well for the engineering organization, the whole concept of agile suited us very well. We have suddenly, while we are producing faster, we suddenly noticed a big chasm in the engineering organization versus the rest of the world. When I say complementing organizations, the consumer organizations, right? Consumers could be clients, consumers could be testing organization, consumers could be support organizations, training organizations. And actually, Scott went beyond talking about other complementing functions in the organization, like marketing, HR, etc. We suddenly started seeing a big chasm between these. So we were producing faster, we were producing more frequently, and suddenly started realizing that the consumers are not geared up to adopt to this situation quite very fast. This led to a great extent. I would like to actually quote an example of dress code was becoming a big discussion, right? So to a great extent, when Uncle Bob was writing a lot about what is professionalism for software engineers, professionalism is not in what he wears, right? In the code that he produces. To an extent that all the other functions were still saying that you need to look well when you are working when you are at a workplace, while engineers were not all that caring about how they look, how their code looks is what mattered to them. That became a big debate, and not to distract too much. Just to build, agile came in very handy in building agility, the culture of agility across the organization. In the sense that there were a lot more functions were getting created, like DevOps. We started building the walls between dev and ops with the new function called DevOps, QE ops, ML ops, AI ops, or whatnot, right? So we started creating a lot more tools to integrate functions together, and hence people started noticing why they need to be. I know Scott talked about a lot more detailed use cases of why other functions are probably not as agile yet. But then there are definitely significant efforts that we made as an organizational leadership to see how we can bring in agility across the organization. It was quite challenging, but I think we are all getting there. Great question.
Thanks, Madan. I'll move on to Vinaya here. Vinaya coming from a coaching and a fintech world, and coaching is where the distinction of adopting agile and building agility actually surfaces a lot. So what's been your experience, Vinaya?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think if we look under the hood a bit, the question is also about our agile practices or agility resulting in better business results, right? First, very, very clearly, let me say that there is a definite correlation between agile, agility, and desired business results. But frequently, in my experience, what I've seen is that agility and business results, they are a little removed or separated in space and time. And what I really mean by that is that we don't talk about agility in the same space as we talk about business results, or in the same context of business results. We don't do that enough. We talk about agility like it's a self-contained, separate thing that development organizations want to do, right? Which is just not true. And when I say that they're also a little removed from each other in time, I mean that some of the small practices or things that we introduce as a part of agile adoptions, they take time to translate into real business results that can be seen, that are visible. And that doesn't make them less important. It just demands that transformation agents, leaders, others need to be much more skilled in drawing and surfacing those connections more explicitly. Help people see the connection between good agile approaches, between agility, and between great business results. So make that connection a little more explicit. So I would just say again in summary that the definition, there's a definite correlation that definitely exists. So start talking about agility in the context of business results, in the same platforms, in the same forums, with the same leaders, and show the relation more explicitly between agile practices and business outcomes. I think that will start mitigating, these kinds of questions to some extent.
Thanks, Pinya. That's good. I think that was pretty distinctive approach also that you mentioned here. Gaurav, I will move to you, product leader. So like I remember what Dr. Anand said, I am a salesman at the end of the day and business is what matters. I think Gaurav at the end of the day is a product leader and wants to focus what we can do with the product irrespective of agile or agility, right? So what is your take on this question when it comes to from your angle of a product leader?
Sure, thanks, Padma. It's a great question. So from product management space, I see agile helping us stay closer to the customer and the markets throughout the product development cycle. It also helps us coming back to the problem space again and again, instead of defining the problem once in the beginning and then continuously play in the solution space in order to build the solution, which sometimes totally delineates us from the progressive customer needs or the market changes which will happen. So agile mindset, I think, thus helps finding product market fit and make better products. It also helps from the operational perspective to roll out products in quick iterations and who are either generating the value for the customer or learn to fail fast, thus saving time, money, and effort of the organization. So I fully concur with Anand, what he mentioned, that with introduction of artificial intelligence, software may be moving towards commoditization, and requirements is the space which will differentiate whether for the organizations how to differentiate themselves, or kind of they go up or down in the ladder, right? So the good news is that the product management is already seeing the benefits of agility and is starting to understand and bring customer needs inside the organizations, utilizing the continuous feedback loop. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Gaurav. Shailesh, moving on to you, who very openly mentioned that release cycles were nothing less than a year and with a great stretch, maybe 10 months, to talking about agile and agility. What's been your experience?
I'll try to demystify as simple as I can, right? If agile is a framework, ability to execute agile is agility, right? All said, big done, right? It's very, very hard thing to implement because you're dealing with, as Gaurav was saying, about mindset. If change is a constant, then having an agile mindset is a great variable to have handy, right? So you will run into the change, the kind of customer expectations, the landscape which is changing, right? You need to respond to the changing priorities. Gone are the days when you say that, hey, take this and this is a 9 months to 12 months roadmap and you execute against that, right? You kind of look back continuously, perpetually in that, right? So while frameworks or guiding principles are there to help you, as Scott and Anand was mentioning and Pope and Lisa mentioning, but what you do at the moment, right, as an organization, not just as a siloed engineering organization or a sales or a product organization, but an organization end-to-end, which is committed to deliver an outcome to a customer, right? They're going to pay for the value, not for the means or the effort you have put in to execute that into what they are looking for. So I think it's a fine distinction in terms of what the books or the guidance are and what you enact that within your org DNA or fabric. That's where there's a differentiation between agility and agile. One very small example, right? If I have to quote an organization which is a learning organization, you have the Scrum practices, right? Are your people taking decisions at that Scrum? How many of decisions are being taken at the Scrum root level? Are people taking that decision? You created the framework, you created the governance body, right? But if 90% of the decisions are going all the way up, I think somewhere agility has to be reminded. The mindset has to be questioned and challenged. And it's really very, very proud moment for us that the one thing which we stayed out was that, hey, processes are for people. People are not for the processes. And we keep reminding ourselves, is it working for us? Is it working for us? Is it working for us? So not marrying to a gospel and then be bold to say it's not working for us across the organization have served us well. I'm definitely looking forward to hear some of the success stories from co-panelists. That's where the distinction is.
Thank you, Shailesh. This was good. And I think actually it almost sets the context for our next question that we are talking about, following a process, right? Recently, my colleague suggested a book, actually. It was an interesting book. Will this make my boat go faster? This is about an Olympic team that was underdog, which went on to win an Olympic gold. One of the best books I read in the recent times. And I think that's where what you said, very relevant. Will this process make us more agile and build agility, right? Asking that question. So I'll connect the same question to our next question. So we have a lot of frameworks, earlier when we started, Gaurav said about Nokia, we had very few options and we were really just not into so many frameworks. And then suddenly there was a plethora of frameworks, like, right, almost I was falling in love with disciplined agile when Scott was explaining it, because it comes across so holistic. So there is a huge a buffet of frameworks, methodologies available for us. And a lot of us are already building a hybrid version. Sangeeta brought in about the Spotify model as part of her survey, which was very interesting to hear. We can even continue to debate whether Spotify is a model, methodology, framework, or just a best practice. So many available. What does future look like from here? With so much available, where are we heading? Are the focus going to be more on that, or how is the future going to look up to us when organization want to start adopting, and especially on sustaining and maintaining the momentum that we have built in? How does that look like? Maybe here I'll start with you, Shailesh. What is your experience, since you set the context for this question?
Sure. No, I'll build on the mindset, because we are very heavy on that. If you have solved that problem, that inertia, because people are not resisting to change, I think we need to explain them the context, why this change is important. What's the value out of it, right? Tools are ancillaries, right? Processes are ancillaries, right? It is how people are committing themselves. And the commitment you cannot force on people, right? You need to take one step at a time. And we did that with workshops, challenging, hearing them out, adopting something slow, adopting something fast. I think we talked about Scott and Anand. Everybody has their own unique journey. So you need to pace it up. While tool technologies, and I think we saw the spices shop which Anand brought in, more tools also is a problem, right? A problem of plenty should be solved by a level of abstraction, right? I think what the future will hold is that, yes, we need not to oversell the processes, but we need to tell people what's the outcome we are expecting from each of the Scrum team processes and others, right? And I won't put cart before the horse. People, their mindset and their action will definitely drive the progress forward. Processes, frameworks, guidelines will make us more efficient and help us out, right? But defining what you want to achieve, I think very hard for a tool or a process to dictate that to any of us. So that onus lies on all of us, right? While I also feel there will be a continuous improvement in terms of building more efficiency, the spirit of agile should be one which will carry forward, right? The tools will reflect that, the processes will reflect that, the offerings will reflect that. So I think that the Anand's point on artificial intelligence, or as we are calling it as augmented intelligence, you cannot offload the thinking process to a tool and process. If you're looking at that, I think I have a bad news for you. How thinking has to be done by the individual. Of course, there will be data insights, there is the corollaries, there is the correlation, there is prescriptive algorithms, which will be provided by the tools. And there's a fine balance with that. I also feel like any evolution, you will have standardization coming in play. I think we already saw the disciplined agile, how nicely Scott has kind of decomposed various things into subcategories. You will see that's happening with the tool. You will see the winners and probably the laggards. You will see the distilling happening. And I look forward the evolution in true spirit of agile. Agile.next version will learn from its predecessor. So that's where I am bullish about that. We might not know all the answers, but we know what the outcomes we are looking for, and we will frame the tools, homegrown or otherwise, as we go forward, Padma.
Makes perfect sense, Shailesh. Vinya, what's your take? What does future you foresee looks like for rest of us?
Before I talk about the future, very briefly about, since I've been doing this for the last decade or so, I would say that my experience 10 years ago as a coach is significantly different from my experience today as a coach. Earlier, it was, we used to get questions like, is this just a fad? Is it going to blow over? Does it really work, etc. And now I don't face so many questions of that nature, not so much resistance of that nature, I would say. People that I'm working with today have mostly had some Agile experience because Agile has been around for a really long time now. So people are familiar with the basics and popular frameworks like Scrum for sure. So my guess, and it is a guess for the future, is that one, Agile is here to stay. So, the days of Agile is dead, etc., are also behind us. I think we've crossed that bump. So Agile is here to stay. It is going to be table stakes going forward for any company. I think we'll have more and more people, and I'm already seeing it, in leadership positions who have worked in an Agile way and believe in it. Also at the entry level, on the other end of the spectrum, people joining the workforce won't need to be weaned off waterfall, right? They're starting with Agile. So in addition to that, I think we have a lot of technology supporting agility, and it will continue to be rapidly adopted. I also think we will see it spreading more rapidly to functions other than development, so HR, finance, marketing, legal, and other places, so that there is more overall organizational agility. And as the ground gets set for organizational agility and business agility, this is my prediction for the Agile community. I think we'll see more frameworks and literature focusing on that space of organizational and business agility. So that was, my fortune-telling attempt. But honestly, my hope, more than my prediction, my hope for the future is that any frameworks that come up in the future will be only skeletal in nature, and will leave a lot of room for people to think and adapt ideas to their specific context. I think that is a real service that we can look forward to. Thank you.
Thanks, Vinay. Over to that literature as well. Thank you. And you're right, like more and more, everybody knows Agile now. In fact, one of the business groups, I was helping them interview a design person for their team, for the UX design team, about 6 to 8 years experience. And I was asking her, what do you think is the difference today we are seeing versus what a waterfall was? And she said, sorry, but I have never been in waterfall. So the first generation of Agile folks have already come into the market. So that's there. So yeah, I think the future will also have to be looking different, obviously, given that first gen Agilists are already coming out who have never seen the waterfall world also.
Right.
I'll now next go with Gaurav on the same question of future looking. How does future look like, Gaurav?
Sure. So I'll start with the data point. I think 87% of Fortune 500 companies either got acquired, merged, or died in last 50 years. 87%, and these were not small companies, they were Fortune 500 companies. And why? I think because they never achieved the right product market fit before scaling, or even if they did achieve product market fit, but they could not keep the pace with respect to the changing customer needs. Right? I'll give two examples over here. First is Nokia. Right? They had a great product market fit and they were selling millions of devices per month. Customers loved Nokia as a brand. I remember in 2005, 2006, the user research telling us that 8 out of 10 people in India having a mobile phone carried a Nokia with them. but the customer needs evolved, and and customers wanted a more exquisite touch and browsing experience. So Nokia found themselves in soft ground with respect to product market fit over here. The second is basically the example being Orkut. So they had millions of users in India, but when Facebook came with their superior product market fit and utilizing the power of network effect, they took all the Orkut users away over here. So hence, what I would say is that it is very important to keep agile mindset and keep iterating on customer needs and the product market fit. Now, when it comes to framework, right, all frameworks, are great and have their own advantages. Where I see industry deriving the maximum value in future is from the principles of lean. And that's why the two examples, right, which I gave, are very pertinent over here. How do you constantly iterate on the customer needs and the market, requirements, from that perspective? And the reason I say is that because the lean part of agile is is no more restricted to the software or high tech industry itself, right? But there are many other industries like manufacturing and supply chain, which are where the lean principles are fully developed. Again, if I take an example over here, of outside the software, how the lean principles are adopted is basically, take an example of Toyota, how they run their factories. Now, utilizing the famous Toyota production system, Toyota was able to produce vehicles with higher quality as well as far more durable. So the American car manufacturers couldn't compete even when they tried to, let's say try to adopt the well-versed, the Toyota methodology. Ultimately, there was so much, in the Toyota way of doing things, which extended beyond their four walls, and how they sourced from their suppliers, even bringing some of the lean principles to their suppliers. That they it proved out to be a great competitive barrier for Toyota vis-a-vis their competitors. And so the American car manufacturers couldn't compete, and Toyota basically effectively was able to sustain and grow their market share in US car market. So that's what I would say, that right, how we can utilize the the agile framework, the agility mindset, and the agile let's say principles in order to kind of iterate on the customer needs, not only in the software industry but across the industries, and kind of get benefit from there, with respect to time to market benefit and understanding the customer needs.
Absolutely. I mean, lean probably is going to stay forever, never going to go away. And Toyota as examples as well. I mean, I think they also were one of the pioneers in customizing mass production, right? Everybody felt that, oh my, car has been literally been done to my requests, my requirements. So that they were pioneers. Shailesh, I'm going to give the responsibility of summarizing this whole question, not Shailesh, sorry, Madhav here. Madhav, I'm going to give you the responsibility of summarizing this whole question of the future here with you as we end this particular question.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for the responsibility. This is great views from all the panelists. I think it's agile started as a mindset, not as a defined process. Like Shailesh was talking about, it is a mindset shift. Once that is there, everything else is going to fit into this, right? So Vinaya was actually referring to agile is going to stay. Agile probably is going to stay here, but then in different forms, right? So as agile's fundamental principle is evolution. So evolution is going to take place, in my opinion. I think we are all now gearing up for, given what is now at hand for us, working from everywhere is setting in every organization now. I think it is going to now take a different shape. We are all in for a new transformation. We are on the verge of a verge of a new transformation now, I would say. It's going to create another big industry, in my opinion, Padma. I've seen agile itself. So when CMM was taking shape, we were all thinking CMM is going to stay here forever, given the way the principles were geared up to improve the industry per se. And when agile dawned now, and we are all thinking that agile probably is the best thing that could have happened to all of us. But then now agile's biggest fundamental principle is to bring the people co-locate. So co-location is not going to exist anymore. We all know that we are all going to probably work 70% of the time remotely, or probably more than 70% of the time remotely across the world. So I'm sure we are all probably gearing up for big changes coming in. to an extent that I would say a lot more frameworks are probably going to be will be facing us with. So I think we'll probably have to wait for that time to happen, and then probably experiment with different what works for you the best, and then adopt to it. And evolution is going to continue to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the summary. In fact, we have a question which is almost related to what we are discussing. So I'll pick up a question from the audience here. So with frequent changes in requirements, especially in this pandemic time, and the work environments also being different, all of us, like what Madhav was talking about, being not really co-located and other things, and this has added on a lot of occupational hazards like stress. Work from home is not as easy as we used to dream of, right? Once upon a time. It's actually adding a lot of stress, anxiety, and even depression of not meeting our fellow colleagues and people in general. So with all this coming in and a really drastically changed work environment and changing requirements from the customers, how are we expecting to complete these requirements? How are we expecting a closure on this requirement successfully from one of our audience here? Maybe Madhav, do you want to start this question here?
What exactly the question, Padma? I'm sorry.
How are we going to meet the customer requirements, especially in this pandemic and a little bit of the post-pandemic time, given that our work environments are also very stressful being away from the office?
Absolutely. Great question. My take on that would be, and honestly, one of the things that we have actually embraced, all of us as an industry embraced, is we have become less about engineering excellence and have become more about customer experience, right? So all of our minds have started thinking. We have people like Gaurav that is helping us with about market demands, consumer demands, customer demands. So we have moved on from the business analyst industry to the product management industry. Working remotely now, we have all now taken the roles of engineers are also slowly taking up those roles of product managers, thinking like a product. We are not thinking a lot about how do we solve this problem, but why am I solving this problem? What problem am I solving? Right. So I think this has been now slowly being nurtured into the engineer's mindset. I think one of my advices to all the budding engineers that are now entering into the market are probably also seasoned engineers is stop thinking a lot about how am I going to solve the problem. That is important, but then think more about what problem am I solving? What value is this problem? If I solve this problem, is going to provide to the customer, right? So if that again a mindset shift, in my opinion, if all the engineers start thinking about customer experience more and more, irrespective of whether you are inside the office or working remotely, that's going to significantly impact how this customer experience work is going to impact.
Thanks, Madhav. Shailesh, you are from typically a very focused product company, a physical product that we all used to relate to once upon a time. Now the definition of product has changed. What's your take on meeting these type of requirements, especially in this stressful time of pandemic and maybe a bit of stretching on to the post-pandemic?
Absolutely. So I think I'll break it down into two things. One is what customer is expecting if things changes. And second is this remote work, right? Agile without co-location was antithesis, right? It was not agile. If you are not co-located, you are not in a room, you are not thrashing, you are not idea storming, you are not brainstorming. I think this is where the change has happened in last 12 to 18 months, right? If you ask a leader, right, maybe 18 months before, can team work remotely? And they call themselves as an agile, right? Maybe people would have told, okay, 10% of the folks would have agreed that maybe let's try it out, right? But 90% would have told no. I think in your dreams, right? But last 12 to 14 months has actually given us a humble reflection of what a human can do once you put them into a situation, right? Physical distances are blurring. And I believe the hybrid model will continue. People will work from remote 70%, 80% of the time. What will happen is there will be emphasis on clarity of role, clarity of responsibility, clarity on outcome. Once you provide that things, the distances will be discounted. So it's a new thing. It just give 8 to 9 months. We're still learning the trick of the trade, right? So you were working like this for 20 years. We are discussing about 20 years of agile journey. And what happened in last 12 months, I think we've done a very, very good job by adapting to this new normal. The second thing on the requirement changes. Good thing, everybody is going through the agile transformation in their own way, including our customers. So they know that change can happen. Their customers can push on and say, you know what, I wanted that requirement, but things have changed, the situation, I want that other thing, right? So can you prioritize it differently? I see the customer vendor relationship is going away. There's a design partners, development partners, requirement partners. I think Madhav was saying that we need to change the mindset from an engineering experience to a customer or a consumer experience. And people are ready to invest their time. Our customers spending more time with us on design review, wireframe review, mock reviews, and it's just part of the game now. So if you are changing a requirement, just make it very, very transparent. What was you supposed to deliver? What is the trade-off? Make an informed choice for the customer. Let's not second guess what they want and what they want to trade off. But if you make things transparent, and that's what Agile advocates, right? You groom perpetually, you prioritize perpetually, and you communicate pretty much on a daily basis. I think you'll take the sting out of any change, and you will put the meaning back into the loop, Padma.
Yeah, thanks, Shailesh. Vinay, I'll move to you quickly for this. From a coaching perspective, what will be your coaching tip on taking care of this situation?
So one, I think the pandemic, of course, has been a total curveball for all of us, and it's very difficult to even assess the impact that it's going to have. So I would say that very specifically to the question from the audience about requirements, I agree completely with what Shailesh said. I think if we are transparent about what we are able to do by when, what is our ranged forecast, if we are very transparent and honest about it with our customers, they are our partners today. They are as invested in the development process as we are. So I think that is a great way of mitigating any surprises. And second is prioritization. I think Anand mentioned it in his keynote that in Agile, the whole approach is that our time boxes are kind of fixed. Our teams are kind of stable. What changes and what we negotiate on is really the work that will get done. So the scope or the requirements are negotiable in Agile, and the honesty and the transparency really helps us have this conversation with our customers more honestly. So.
Yeah, thanks, Vinay. Gaurav, I'm the product leader that you are. I'm going to request you to summarize this from a product leadership angle, which is very, very a relevant question for all of us today.
Great. Thanks, Padma, for giving this responsibility. I think I would say that I totally agree with what Madhav, Shailesh, Vinaya, and even what Anand referred in his keynote. So things are changing. I think co-location, for the Scrum team is a thing of past. We need to start working in a way where it doesn't matter. The person is sitting at home, at office, or in US, or in Europe, wherever your other team member is. You need to be able to still work in the same mode. From that perspective. The other thing is, I totally and 100% agree that we as customers are our partners now. Our suppliers are our partners, and we need to kind of co-create along with them. And prioritization is the key right now, right? So obviously with pandemic in place, we have more stress, and we cannot deliver. We are delivering more than 100% what is expected, but it's very easy for people to get burned out. And it is the key thing over here is to understand the customer needs properly. Sometimes if we iterate multiple times from the customer needs, we are able to understand the right the prioritized customer needs in the right way, and build the things which really matter to the customer. And the product management has a very key role to play over here to kind of make sure that engineering is not stuffed with the work, but they are doing the right work which really makes a difference. And that is the key over here. And I think that's what how I would summarize the whole discussion.
Awesome, Gaurav. And we have a lot of questions, but in the interest of time, I'm going to probably end this session with this one question, which really doesn't mean we end the session, because this is a discussion that is worth having for a couple of weeks for all of us, but we are in the interest of time. So one last question, and I'm going to request each panelist to stick to one KPI. So there is a question on what is the most relevant KPI, or the OKR is probably the most buzzword today. that is going to help us measure the relevance of agile adoption, right? Like measure the relevance of agile in the organization. So I'm going to request each panelist to stick to one metric or one KPI that comes to your mind on the fly, because it's not a question we prepared for. Maybe I'll start with you, Gaurav. On this, what is that one metric you would really, if you were to take just one metric, what would that be for you?
So I would say, with the keeping in mind we are defining agile as a mindset. I would say the net promoter score, should be the one, which we should keep in mind, that how closely we are working with the customers, how nicely we have understood their needs, and what are the prioritized ones, which we are building. That was, I would say, is the key one.
Thank you. Vinaya, from your angle, what would be that one metric you would focus on?
I think net promoter score is great for sure. I was thinking more in terms of, the feedback loops are so central to agility, to our ability to respond to change. So I would go with lead time or similar metrics, which will really help us see how tight our feedback loops are, which should in turn help us improve our net promoter score and many other metrics.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Madhav, what would be your choice of a metric?
I would vote for net promoter score as well, but the net promoter score to a degree that it's a more granular net promoter score at the engineering level as well, right? So if we can probably build a promoter score across the functions within the organization, that will be a fantastic metric to have, because the organizations are becoming more and more integrated. That would be one measure I would
being both having a centralized net promoter score and a decentralized at each level. I think that's brilliant. Shailesh, it's not easy to go last when people have already answered this.
I thought you will ask me to summarize this question. Nice one for me.
I'll ask you to take a look on this.
No, I think the default is outcome based, so it's net promoter score. But I'll do two net promoter score. One is customer, which will tell you how product is behaving, and one is employee net promoter score, how people are feeling about this change, right? Are they feeling more empowered? Are they taking decisions? Have they autonomy? Have they cross skilled? I think both are net promoter scores, but don't over index on one side. I think it's a fine balance. We need to take team along. We need to take customer along. So
awesome point.
Outstanding. Yeah. Thank you, Shailesh. Thanks for this summary. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to thank everybody without naming, because that will take a long list. So thank you everybody for being with us, and I'll hand it over to the Zinnov events to take over from here and help us close the event.
Thank you, Padma. Thank you for moderating this very engaging session where we had like so many questions come in and so much insights from our panelists. We had like on the ground reality, insightful conversations and tips from actual practitioners who are working on it on a day-to-day basis. This has been a fantastic series today. I mean, this is a topic that go on and on about, and that's why we are already over time. 120 minutes is not sufficient to cover the entire breadth of Agile. But thanks to Anand for the insightful journey on Agile, and for Scott on all the tips that he provided for a disciplined Agile, and these eminent panelists for providing all your insights as well. Thank you so much, and thanks to Persistent for being a partner in this presentation. And also thanks to all the wonderful audience. This has been a fantastic participation and fantastic engagement from you all. Hope you all take away some good key insights that you can employ at your job at day to day. And one final point to note, we will be continuing the discussion. This is a very relevant topic in the relevant times, and please look forward to this in our upcoming India Confluence, which is scheduled for 6th to 9th July 2021. With that note, thank you so much. Have a good day to everybody on the other side, and good evening if you're here on the US coast. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you everyone from my side.
Thank you.
Also.
Thank you.
It was a great having you. Thank you.